Welcome to the entertaining Talkin' Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Hope everybody is staying safe out there. But I wanted to go over some of the news in the NFL today. Some of them were cuts, some of them were tags. A lot of big name players. Delaney Walker, Hunter Henry was tagged, along with a lot of other players. But I don't think any of that, is in any way, shape, or form related to the New York Giants. However, there were two big names at positions of need, one of which was tagged, and there have been grumblings about Matt Judon potentially being tagged and traded for over a month now. I did a video on it a while back. In addition to that, one cornerback that a lot of my subscribers have brought up in the past that was cut today by the Minnesota Vikings, due for cap flexibility, was Xavier Rhodes. Xavier Rhodes, of course, a former first-round pick, I think back in 2013 for the Minnesota Vikings. He's a three-time Pro Bowler. I'll get into more of the specifics with him and whether or not I think the New York Giants should go after either one of these guys if the price was right. Rhodes is going to be 30 years old. I believe Judon will be 28. Judon's coming off a career year in which he had 9.5 sacks, had a strong year for the Baltimore Ravens. And unlike Zadarius Smith, the Baltimore Ravens thought to franchise tag him before they let him go. And like I said, there were rumors, though, a month ago that they may look to tag and trade him. Now, the price for them has to be right, and the price for the New York Giants would have to be right. Now, the one thing that complicates things for Matthew Judon in this deal is the fact that he's been franchise tagged as an outside linebacker as opposed to an edge rusher. And that is a great deal of difference in money. An edge rusher, if you're franchise tagged, you make about $19.5 million as a defensive end. As a linebacker, you make about $16.5 million. So it's a $3 million difference. That would make him a more attractive option, obviously, for the New York Giants if they were to trade for him. Like I said, the question is the price. If it was for a third-round pick, like I've said all along, it makes complete sense because you bring him in, and if you don't want to keep him long-term, you let him walk, and you get a comp pick for him in the following year, which would negate the third-round loss. Obviously, you wouldn't have a third-round pick to trade in this year's draft. It would have to be in 2021, being that we traded that pick to acquire Leonard Williams. But there's the attraction there for me with him. I don't think he's an elite player, but if it's on the right deal, it could make a lot of sense. I'll get a little bit more into the specifics with Judon when we pull up the notes. As far as Xavier Rhodes goes, I've said time and time again that the New York Giants have an incredibly young secondary. They have nobody with any experience back there, especially at the cornerback position. At least at the safety, if they keep on Bethea, he's been around the league for a long time. Peppers has been around the league now for 4 years. But at the cornerback position, you're dealing with all second-year pros. Sam Beal's barely played. DeAndre Baker's only played one season in the NFL. Julian Love, he's only going into his second year, and he only played like the last 4 games last year. So I have been pretty outspoken that I am completely in favor for the New York Giants in bringing in a veteran. Now, the question is, do you want to spend big bucks and go after a guy like Byron Jones, or are you looking for more of a bargain guy to mentor these guys and take some of the pressure off DeAndre Baker? Well, if you're looking for that, someone like Xavier Rhodes may make sense, but he only makes sense for the right price because at this point in time, he is a shell of himself. He is nowhere near the player he was when he first came into the league. He's 30 years old. He's lost a step or two from everything you read, and I'll pull up some of the quotes of what people have had to say about him. But a lot of people compared his decline to that of Darrelle Revis when Revis hit about 30 years old. Both of them were known as island corners, guys that you could stick out there and take away half the field, when they first came up. Obviously, Revis was more accomplished, but Rhodes is not a slouch himself. But in recent years, he's lost a step or two, like I said, and he's not near what he was. Now, given the right situation, it's very possible he could be a somewhat successful corner. He complained last year that the Minnesota Vikings asked him to do things he wasn't capable of doing anymore due to his age, and he thought he should have been used in a different way. And maybe the New York Giants will look at that and say, maybe he's worth a shot, being that he has some experience and could add something to our secondary core. But I wouldn't bank on it. Due to his decline in play, I don't really see the New York Giants having any heavy interest in him unless he comes at a severe discount, which I don't think he would do. The Vikings, by cutting him, saved $8.1 million on this year's cap. They also cut a former New York Giant, Linval Joseph. So we'll have to wait and see what the Vikings decide to do with that cap space, whether they try to retain somebody else on their roster or to try to bring somebody else in from the outside. But both Joseph and him at the open market. The reason I'm not talking about Joseph, well, we're pretty strong at that position to begin with, so I don't really see the New York Giants being interested in him. It is a possibility that we could be interested in Xavier Rhodes. But let's jump into some of the quotes about Judon and Rhodes, and we're going to start with Rhodes. Here's the tweet from Courtney Cronin regarding the move by the Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings are releasing Xavier Rhodes per source. That creates $8.1 million in cap space ahead of free agency. I also think with the combination of Linval Joseph, it was something like 18. They create a lot of cap space here with these two cuts. Another thing I want to mention, Antoine Bethea remains on the roster, and it's looking increasingly likely that Bethea will probably remain on with the Giants. It's not something I'm going to kill them for, being that, he's only making $2.75 million a year. I would cut him. I think they could use that $2.5 million somewhere else, but it's not the end of the world. Next thing I wanted to pull up for you guys was his stats. Like I said, he's a 3-time Pro Bowler, 1-time All-Pro as recently as 2017. And if you look at his stat sheet, he's pretty durable. He's only missed 3 games over the last 2 years, 3 games over the last 3 years. He played a full season in 2017. Now, he made the Pro Bowl last year, but I'm going to get into some of the things that people said based off of that. A lot of people thought it was a joke. Many people said it was the worst Pro Bowl selection in the history of the NFL. People know that the Pro Bowl has become a joke now, and anybody can make it because nobody shows up to go to it. But yeah, in the past, he was known as one of the better corners in the league. All-Pro selection just 3 years ago, but he has significantly dropped off in recent years due to the fact that he's lost his step. Here's the next thing we're going to pull up. But let's be honest, Rhodes didn't have a good year. Actually, he had a really awful season. Per Pro Football Focus, among the 120 cornerbacks who played 300-plus snaps, only 6 had a lower PFF grade than Rhodes, and his grade was like 46. In 15 games, he didn't end up with a single interception and forced just 1 fumble. And that was, talking about his Pro Bowl selection. And then these people came out with funny tweets regarding it. Xavier Rhodes making the Pro Bowl this year may be the worst Pro Bowl selection ever. And here's another one. Xavier Rhodes, The dude allowed 132.7 passer rating when targeted, 75% completion percentage when targeted regarding his Pro Bowl selection. So, obviously, it was kind of like a running joke when he was named to the Pro Bowl because he certainly didn't deserve it. He had a horrible year last year. He also committed a lot of penalties. I read an article where he had 7 holding penalties in just the first 8 games because he had lost a step or two and wasn't the player he was. And he's not a guy that you could really leave one-on-one with anybody at this point. But maybe due to his experience, if you could bring him in on a $6 million deal, $7 million deal, maybe the Giants have interest. But to be completely honest with you, I'm not too interested. This is the news regarding Matt Judon, the pass rusher from the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, the Giants potentially interested in acquiring an edge rusher. The Ravens are placing the franchise tag on Matt Judon, sources say. Expected. Soon will be official, and I believe now it is. And again, this shouldn't be anything that was unexpected. I was talking about this. Many people were talking about this for weeks. And I think a lot of the edge rushers will be franchise tagged, and Judon was expected to be one of them. They even went as far to say months ago that they expected him to potentially be tagged and traded if the right deal presented itself. Now, the interesting part of this dilemma is the whole contract thing that I talked about. He is not going to be happy, and I'm sure he's going to try to fight this because what's interesting, Judon, I think it was 4/5 of his snaps he was lined up in terms of rushing the passer. Now, because of the wording to the franchise tag, he technically qualifies as an outside linebacker, but he does the same thing a defensive end does. It's just that he plays in a scheme where he's used as an outside linebacker instead of a defensive end. So he's going to fight for that $3 million. But if he does not get it, it could make him even more attractive on the trade market. And if he's not happy there, it's very possible if Baltimore gets offered the right deal, they will look to trade him. The outside linebacker in that tweet is important. The franchise tag for defensive ends was $19.3 million last year. Well, it was only $16.3 for linebackers. There will be a similar split this year. The difference in money will not please Judon, which could make things uncomfortable. And obviously, when things are uncomfortable, you look to trade that player away from the roster. Teams don't want drama, especially in the NFL. You go back, you look at Odell Beckham with the New York Giants. So this will be an interesting situation to monitor. And the deeper it goes into the offseason, probably the less the Ravens could get. So if they think they're going to have a fight on their hands and they don't see Judon as being a guy that's there long term, well, they may look to trade him. Judon's definitely going to fight for that extra $3 million. We'll have to wait and see if he gets it. Now, talking about it from the other side, it may actually be smarter for Judon to play on the franchise tag this year for the simple reason, like I've stated in some of my more recent videos, the salary cap's due to go up by 20% next year. So it might even be smarter for a lot of these players to actually play in a franchise tag this year, stay healthy, have a solid season, and come back and get paid a lot more than you would have this season if you signed a 4 or 5 year deal. So Judon may welcome playing on the franchise tag, but he may be a problem for the Baltimore Ravens. But the Ravens obviously are a win-now team, so they may very well just say, we want to keep him on a one-year deal, and we'll see if Judon holds out. If he does, that's when they may look to trade him. I don't see him getting traded anytime soon, but he's certainly a name to monitor for New York Giants fans if we don't end up with an elite pass rusher if the right deal presented itself. I'm not trading a second-round pick even for this guy, but if I get him for a third, similar to what they did with Clowney last year with the Seahawks, I'm definitely interested. You'd be getting him for, at least as of now, you'd be getting him for about $16 million a year when some of the other guys that have similar production are probably going to get closer to 20 or more, and it would only be a one-year commitment. And like I said at the beginning of the video, you could then let him walk and get a comp pick for him or tag and trade him for a second year. So those are some of the options that the New York Giants would have on the table if they were to acquire Matt Judon. As far as Rhodes goes, I don't really have much interest. There's a lot of other cornerbacks out there that, yes, may not be as accomplished, but they have not lost the steps that Rhodes has. Rhodes, to me, is a shell of himself. And, given the right deal and the right situation, could make sense with his experience and if he was used in the right way, and maybe the Giants will see it that way. But I think Rhodes, based on the fact that he's been to 3 Pro Bowls in the last 4 years, probably in his head thinks that he's worth a lot more than what I think he is. We'll have to wait and see what happens, though, guys. As always, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.